A much better way to intermittent fast would be at the end of the day. So make your last meal at like 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock, and then fast until the following morning, maybe until 8 in the morning, something like that. That's a much better, for many women, especially women with thyroid issues, any sort of autoimmune disease, doing it later in the day is not nearly as stressful as doing it in the morning. So that's a little trick for people who want to kind of tighten that feeding window, want some more structure, want to have a few more hours without feasting. Do it at the end of the day.
Welcome to Functional Moms Podcast, lifestyle medicine for women over 40. Let's age on our own terms.
Hi, everyone. This episode is for you if you are a woman over 40 and want to get to the bottom of weight loss resistance and look and feel your best. We are going to talk about the Prolon Fasting Mimicking Nutrition Program. And don't worry if you don't know what that means, because I didn't either. And I've learned so much about it and the benefits of fasting. We will be talking all things weight management, from the use of peptide weight loss drugs to the truth about sugar and insulin resistance.
Audrey Zona is an integrative health and nutrition coach specializing in the psychology of eating. Audrey trained with the Institute for Psychology of Eating. She is one of only 3 coaches and spokespeople for Prolon, the fasting mimicking diet and nutrition program.
Audrey struggled with weight loss since childhood and felt called to do this work, having been there with her own struggles. She has helped hundreds of clients make educated food choices and transform their nutritional habits, leading to a balanced relationship with food.
Audrey, welcome to the show. I have to share with the audience that I was in Audrey's Prolon coaching group, and when I tried the program 2 years ago, and I found it to be so helpful. So I'm so thankful that you came on today to talk a little bit about this and share with people, because there is so much science behind this whole program. So can you please tell us a little bit about Prolon and what it's all about?
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Kristen and Raquel, for having me. This is a joy. I love talking all things wellness, weight loss, and fasting. So Let's get to it. So Prolon is a 5-day mimicking fasting program. What does that mean? Well, it mimics a 5-day water fast is what it does. So We are so lucky that Dr. Walter Longo, who is pretty much the expert on longevity, developed this incredible plan a number of years ago with, I think it's important to note, about $36 to $40 million went into this in terms of research and development, and over 20 years to create. So this is a real science-backed program. This is not fly by night. It's also being funded by the government, because during the clinical trials, we are seeing tremendous reversal of disease in the body. So it's really an interesting concept. People don't understand, how could you possibly fast and the body thinks it's only having water, but you're actually eating some food for 5 days? Well, I'll explain what happens. The body has a certain threshold at which it senses food. We call that the food sensing pathways. We fly under the radar of these pathways with just an appropriate amount of calorie, macronutrients, and micronutrients, so the body doesn't sense food. It's kind of cool. And so here we are in a prolonged fast. The body thinks it's only having water for 5 days, yet we are still nourishing our bodies and, even more importantly, our gut. So it's a combination of soups, bars, olives, crackers, teas, and some supplements. And the first day is not so bad. The first day is around 1,100 calories, and then it drops pretty significantly. Day 2 through 5, it goes from like 700 to 800 calories per day. But what's really interesting is that most people, once they get into ketosis, they're not hungry anymore. So typically day 3 is a little bit of a struggle, but then 4 and 5, people are really just flying. They're doing really, really well. I know we're going to talk about the benefits, and you probably have a whole host of questions for me, but all in all, what's the most important part about Prolon and prolonged fasting is that the body goes into autophagy. Autophagy can truly only be accomplished with a prolonged fast. There are many individuals out there in the wellness arena that will say, oh, well, you could just have an overnight fast of 13 hours or 14 hours and exercise and you'll be in autophagy. Well, according to Dr. Longo, that's not so. You have to be in a true water fast or FMD for a minimum of 3 days before the body can enter autophagy. Why do we care so much about autophagy? Well, that is where the body does its major internal cleaning. We clean out old, worn out parts of cells. These are the parts of cells that are possibly diseased or broken or just not working properly. Those are the cells that cause problems in our body long term. So autophagy is truly like an internal doctor. It's like, I always say to my participants, imagine you've got this little like Pac-Man running around inside cleaning up all of your old worn out cells. That is the beauty of autophagy and doing Prolon. So by the end of those 5 days, not only have you lost some weight, you've hopefully retained all of your muscle mass, which we can talk about in a moment, why Prolon differs from water fast. But the magic is really this internal cleanup and rejuvenation of your system.
And so would that be why after I do it, I feel like my skin looks amazing, like it's been completely rejuvenated, which is crazy.
So, Kristen, it's so interesting you bring that up because we actually just did a clinical trial last year, and we are now proving through 2 different skin analyses. Vizia is one of them, where we have proven that with 1 round of Prolon only, there has been visible difference in skin hydration. Fine lines have been diminished, and pore size has also been diminished. And there is a glow to the face that participants did not have prior to doing Prolon. Yep.
Yeah, that's totally what I noticed. And people actually have made comments to me like, you look different, or, you look great today. What happened? So that is a real thing for sure.
It's a real thing. Yes.
So one of our questions with the ketosis, we were curious how you can go into ketosis if you're eating carbs, because the program does have carbs.
Yeah. But so what happens is the overall total amount of glucose is so minimal that even though there are some carbs in the soups and a little bit in the bars, the overall glucose availability is so low that eventually you will go into ketosis. It's just kind of how it works. But just a reminder that Prolon is not about being in ketosis. It is not a keto program. Most individuals will eventually get to ketosis, but that's not the main event. You can achieve autophagy without going into ketosis. So it's like I always say, if you're checking your ketones, they really don't encourage any checking of ketones or really paying attention to that because that's not what Prolon is about.
Well, would you say that one of the top benefits of the fasting is the autophagy? Is that like the highlight, the main event?
That is the highlight. What's very interesting is I take a poll every time I coach, and I coach upwards of, anywhere from 500 to 1,000 people one time a month. And I would say at least 50% of my participants are there for weight loss. So although we don't really promote the program as a weight loss program, it kind of is a weight loss program. And there are many individuals using it as a tool for weight loss.
Right.
But the main event, the reason he created this incredible program is around autophagy and longevity, living longer and living healthy. So that really is the main focus.
Right.
But there are so many individuals who are using it as to reverse diabetes. I have cancer patients using it. I have people with insulin resistance using it. I have people with autoimmune disease using it and weight loss. So it's sort of like it kind of covers and checks off every box.
Great. When on Prolon, you aren't eating any protein.
There is very minimal protein. There is some, yeah.
So, but because I remember you mentioning something about muscle mass. So you don't lose muscle mass while you're on this?
Yeah. So the reason why you don't lose any muscle is because there is an ingredient starting on day 2 called the L drink. The L drink comes in a little bottle like this, and it had the main ingredient is glycerin, which is a sugar alcohol, which will not spike blood sugar or cause a release of insulin. But what this sugar does, because the body's first defense is to grab onto any sugar that it can get. It wants glucose. That's just what the body wants. So the moment you start to drink this, it will grab onto it. And what it does is this specifically preserves your muscle. That is what this is intended for. And so this is the only item in the fast that correlates to how much you weigh. So I get a lot of questions about, my husband's 220 pounds. How is it that he has the same amount of food as I do and I weigh 130? Well, it's because it really doesn't matter. This is putting you into a water fast. Everything in these boxes equal water. That's it. The only difference in terms of weight is this L drink. So the larger you are, the more you get, because the larger the person, the more lean body mass they have, and we want to hold on to that. The other way we hold on to that lean body mass is with a small spike of blood sugar after eating the soups. It was intended to create a small blood sugar spike that would last maybe 20 minutes to an hour, and then it would come back down. Also, it's muscle preserving. So there is some carbohydrate, but it's there for a reason, to help you hold on.
Okay.
So really all my participants that are using smart scales, either maybe even going for a DEXA scan, or they're using their in-body scale at home or a fit track, they will report to me, I'm down X amount of percents of body fat, but I didn't lose any muscle. Now, there are some individuals that may lose. It's not that uncommon to lose a little bit, but it's significantly better than if you were to do a 5-day water fast. You're going to lose a ton of muscle when you do water fast. So that's really one of the biggest differences between water and Prolon.
And so I'm assuming they came up with this all through the studies. They checked people before and after using the L drink and all that. And that's how they came to this.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
All right. So I guess what you just said answers the next question, which was, what are the cons of fasting? And I guess if you're doing a water fasting, you're going to lose a ton of muscle mass.
In addition to that, water fasting is so hard to comply. I have spoken.
I couldn't imagine.
Done 5-day water fasts and even dry fasts. I can't even imagine. So you will be very tired. You will be very weak.
Right.
It can be kind of dangerous. I mean, I know people who've gotten ill doing water fasts, kidney stones, all kinds of crazy things happen. And I mean, it's just not enjoyable, right? Whereas Prolon, at least you're eating something, at least you're being nourished, which is really important while you're in a fasting state, to still be nourished. And all of the ingredients in the soups, the bars, are there for a reason, to really help your gut flora as well. One of the biggest ingredients is inulin, which is a prebiotic fiber. So a lot of my participants will report back that their digestion has gotten so much better, that they're going to the bathroom after not going for months. All kinds of crazy stories and kind of miracle stories I have heard over the past 3.5 years. Yeah.
Now, I had a question. I have heard that you can regrow stem cells through the fast. Is that something that's possible? That it would help?
I don't have too much information on that yet. The Prolon medical team will always share with the coaches, new findings, new studies, things of that nature. That hasn't been brought to my attention, so I can't really speak to it, but I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah. Okay. Because it's just such a rejuvenating process that I guess we really never do. To your point, most of us might be intermittent fasting, but we're not getting this kind of benefit.
Is totally different. And I'm personally not really much of a fan of intermittent fasting. I haven't seen, with the population of people that I mostly work with, intermittent fasting tends to backfire quite a bit. So
I kind of feel like that firsthand. I had that, when I first started doing it, I felt like it worked really great. And then quickly it stopped and almost backfires. Yeah. That's my experience.
I feel like it works very well for men, because what happens with women, we're so hormonally driven, and fasting like that is tremendous stress on the body. So when you're going into those menopausal years, many women's cortisol is off, the adrenals are a little fatigued. This is now just adding more stress, and it produces this cascade of events internally where women don't, unless you're really working with a coach or a functional doctor or someone that can really explain these things, they just think, oh, well, I'm supposed to be doing this for weight loss. I'm going to muscle through feeling uncomfortable because this is what I'm supposed to be doing, because X, Y, and Z have spoken about how great intermittent fasting is. And so I will always say, listen to your body. Your body will tell you if this is working or not. And I can't even count the number of women who've come to me over the past 10 years saying, I cannot get these 20 pounds off, but I've been intermittent fasting. Why isn't this working? The moment I get them to start eating breakfast, the weight falls off. I mean, I'm not even kidding you. I mean, between eating breakfast, prioritizing protein, prioritizing, other things, and taking that stress down yields weight loss. So, I think a 12 or 13-hour fast is wonderful for like most everybody, but beyond that, it's just not necessary.
Yeah, that's what I do. I use intermittent fasting works for me, but not in the largest scale of intermittent fasting. I do more like, like that, like 16 hours, which includes my sleep hours. But it works for me in terms of, I was just sharing with Kristen that sometimes if I notice that I'm having a lot of crazy cravings, then I'll be like, I'll put myself on a little intermittent fasting because it just kind of helps me. Maybe it's more like creating boundaries for myself. And it just kind of helps me like just clean up my act a little bit. It helps maybe the structure in my mindset. So in that regard, it helps me, but I totally feel very strongly when you go into those longer hours and the stress that you can feel, the uncomfortable feeling that you feel in your body, because I've also done that as well. And listening to my body is, listening like, okay, you know what? This feels like not so good. And I think that's such a great message. Like, listen to your body.
I do think that if someone listening is interested in shortening their feeding window, a much better way to intermittent fast would be at the end of the day. So make your last meal
Yes.
at like 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock, and then fast until the following morning, maybe until 8 in the morning, something like that. That's a much better for many women, especially women with thyroid issues, any sort of autoimmune disease. Doing it later in the day is not nearly as stressful as doing it in the morning. So that's a little trick for people who want to kind of tighten that feeding window, want some more structure, want to have a few more hours without feasting.
Right.
Do it at the end of the day.
Wow. Look at that. We already got a quick tip earlier on in our session here.
Wow, that's a great tip. Okay. I guess my question next is, well, first of all, is there anyone that shouldn't do Prolon? Is there anyone that would be dangerous for?
Yes. So Prolon shouldn't be done by really anybody under the age of 18. It is not recommended for people over 70 because we just haven't done testing. However, I have had hundreds of participants in their 70s and even in their early 80s do Prolon. But please, if you decide to do that, you need to be working with a healthcare provider just to make sure that it's safe for you. Besides that, pregnant women should not do Prolon, and anyone who's had any sort of an eating disorder should not do Prolon because it is such restriction that it can oftentimes trigger old patterns, and we don't want to get those triggered. So those are really the only stipulations. Or if you are super, super, super underweight, is a chance that you might lose a few pounds. If you're really, really frail or thin, maybe not the best idea, but everyone else is welcome to do it for sure.
Okay. And then, so we also wanted to ask you about insulin resistance. It's a word that we hear constantly. Definitely as women over 40, I know it can be a big problem. So we're just curious, like what your thoughts are on that and how, what are some things that we could do to make it better
Yes.
for ourselves?
So I think what happens with many women over 40, what they notice is that they start to develop a resistance to insulin. And what that really means, well, let me explain it this way. As we are in those menopausal years, our estrogen is declining. As estrogen is declining, our insulin is automatically rising. It's almost like a seesaw. One's going down, the other goes up. And for us women, maybe you're used to having a glass of wine every night, or you're used to having some sweets or bread or whatever that might be, more carbohydrates. And so it's this sort of like cycle of events. Maybe we're not sleeping so well. So we are the following day, we find ourselves hungrier. We're looking for energy. We go to the carbs. Maybe we go to the wine. The wine in turn makes us sleep really poorly. So it's like all of a sudden you're doing all of these things to help you feel better, but then they're really hurting you in the end. So as the estrogen's declining and insulin is rising, we are not able to process the sugars and the carbs possibly the way we used to. So I hear from so many women, my whole life I've had X, Y, and Z a couple of times a week. Why can't I do this now? I'm gaining weight like crazy. So a lot of that is because of that juxtaposition between the declining estrogen and the rising insulin. Oftentimes our bodies just are changing. We've been having this high sugar, high carb diet for so many years. over time, the body becomes resistant to this output of insulin. So it's like the receptors aren't working properly anymore. It's just kind of like I'm sort of dumbing it down, right? So all of a sudden, whereas you used to be able to have a bagel and your body could process it, no big deal. Now we have the bagel, a major blood sugar spike, a release of insulin, and now you're even fighting with those levels all day long. So many individuals, if insulin resistant is really severe, some doctors will put you on something called metformin. There are other, supplementation that a lot of the functional doctors will use to try to, regulate your insulin. And then of course, we take it a step further to the weight loss medications that are, out now between, Mounjaro, Wegovy, and Ozempic. And there are a few others on the market that also will help with insulin. So I always recommend to my women, if they have a touch of it, to just keep those carbohydrates more moderate to low at each meal. Obviously, prioritizing protein, especially in the morning, is the most important time of day to get that protein in. And of course, exercise. Exercise will help tremendously. Our muscles are like a container for glucose. So the more muscle you have, the better your insulin regulation will be. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. You really have, I'm sure there are many of your listeners wondering, well, how do I know if I have insulin resistance? Well, your doctor, hopefully your GP is checking your fasting glucose and doing the proper testing to see what's going on. If you feel that your GP isn't really diving in deep enough, that's where I would encourage working with more of a functional or integrative practitioner to really look at your labs on a deeper level. But truly, insulin resistance is something that's so treatable and reversible. So much has to do with the diet and with your exercise. I mean, you may have a genetic predisposition, so that may sort of contribute to your numbers. But I always say your genetics load the gun and your environment pulls that trigger. So really take a close look at what your environment is doing to you and start to make those, deeper changes.
If you're putting on belly fat, would that be a sign of insulin resistance?
So it could be, it could not be. So what happens with menopause in particular, so there is something found in fat cells. I don't know if I'm explaining this correctly, but I know that the reason we oftentimes put on belly fat is because it's either an enzyme, there's something in fat cells that can trigger a production of estrogen. And it was my gynecologist that explained this to me. So I may not be explaining it perfectly, but I know there is some relationship between belly fat and estrogen.
Yes. Okay. Because we had a guest on talk about the meno belly.
Okay.
Which we had never heard of, but it's a thing apparently. Your body needs to make estrogen. Yeah.
It's a real thing. The body is searching for estrogen. So it knows that it can put on fat around the middle because those fat cells actually do something. There's like a protein or an enzyme or something that actually can help to produce more estrogen. And so that is why we often get this whole belly thing going on. But I have to say that the women who really have made weightlifting intentional, have really watched their diet, they're not gaining the belly along with HRT. Now, some people cannot take hormonal replacement therapy, but if you can, I highly encourage you to have this conversation with your doctor. I hear from women all day long that their diet really is good and their exercise really is good. The addition of HRT seems to make a difference for many individuals. Now, it's not going to be this magic weight loss drug per se, but for many women who are doing all the other things or checking off the boxes, just the addition of that, maybe because now we're giving the body the estrogen, the body doesn't have the need to put the fat on around the belly. So I think that there are lots of ways that you can really stave off that belly, but you have to be very intentional with all the other aspects of your lifestyle. including prioritizing sleep, including prioritizing meditation, journaling, so that you have this reduction in stress, so that you're in more of a parasympathetic mode. I mean, all these things work together in tandem. People think that like weight loss and calories and macros are in a silo, and they're not. Everything works together like a dance. So you really need to kind of look at all these areas of your life and really say, if I'm going to, I have a few clients, all we work on is getting them to sleep earlier than 1 a.m. I mean, they just are late birds, and it's really impacting their ability to lose weight. So, before I even talk about food or talk about fasting, I'm just getting them into a rhythm of going to bed at a reasonable hour. So there's a lot to this.
For sure. And so you mentioned briefly about the peptide weight loss medications. Can you just share a little bit more on that? Because that is such a craze. You hear so many things that it's great, it's helping people, and then it's bad. When you go off it, all the weight comes back. So what should people do when it comes to this?
So I know you're going to be shocked, and most people are so surprised when they hear me say that I am a fan of the medication for specific people.
Okay.
Couple of things. Number one, I think for some individuals who have been working their entire adult life on weight loss, and they do all the things, and they've been like, I have a handful of clients that have been with me for years. We have checked off every possible box. Their body just won't work the way that it's supposed to. And the peptides have changed their life. Now, they are already doing all the lifestyle habits because of our work together. So they understand what they need to do in terms of nutrition, movement, reducing stress, sleep, all of those things. So this is like the last piece of the puzzle, and they're weaning off the meds. They've lost all their weight. They're weaning off. They feel amazing, and they're really not putting the weight back on. So you just have to make sure that you're working on the lifestyle habits simultaneously. For the person who wants to lose 10 pounds, but still wants to have McDonald's and ice cream, but they're just eating less of it, but they're not working on, say, their relationship with food or the underlying reasons as to why they were overeating in the first place, guess what? They will lose their 10 pounds, and they're going to gain every pound back or more, because they haven't taken the time to really dissect why are they having a weight issue in the first place. And that is where I go with my clients and all of my colleagues that do my kind of work. We're all in agreement that not a problem taking the medication, but you've got to do the work at the same time. Otherwise, you go off the meds, your hunger will come back to some extent, and you won't know how to handle it. You're going to go back to old habits, back to old ways, gain it all back. Now, there are obviously the medication is a godsend for those individuals who have diabetes, who have, other real metabolic issues. I have to say the numbers in terms of blood pressure, cholesterol, all of those markers are also improving tremendously in addition to the weight loss. So I speak to my functional doctor about the patients that we share. And yes, they're losing weight, but what's more exciting is the blood work.
Wow.
The numbers are changing incredibly, whereas beforehand, like it wasn't working that way. They were taking supplements, maybe they were taking even a cholesterol medication, but this seems to really be driving it home. What else can I say about it? I think that also micro dosing, compounding the medication and doing a micro dose has also been very, very beneficial for some individuals. All the symptoms in terms of like the nausea, the constipation, things like that, my clients, they're having very, very little bits of that. It's a blip because we are also compounding smaller doses. So when you do that, the patient is reaping the benefits without experiencing the negative side effects. So really, I would say if anyone listening is interested, just make sure that you're working with the right doctor who truly understands how to prescribe the medication. And if you start on that lowest dose and you're having success, stay there. You don't need to keep upping it. So just really having a very close relationship with your practitioner is super important. And I don't want anyone to think that like it's cheating. I think there is a lot of shame for some people around taking the medication, and it shouldn't be so. Being obese, it's a disease. Obesity is a disease, just like all other diseases that are out there. And I think it's time for us to understand that obese people, they can't help it. This is so much of this is out of their control. Their brain doesn't work properly. The reward center of their brain is like faulty. There's so much food noise. Like there's so many reasons as to why somebody is obese. And the fact that we now have these medications to help these individuals and to stop the food noise and to stop all the shame around what they're doing and they don't want to be doing what they're doing. I think the medications are amazing. They're here to stay. There's just going to be more and more of them. I know they're working on pill form versus injection. There's already a couple of different pill forms out there. I just feel that it's so important, if you are taking meds, to be working on your lifestyle habits at the same time. That's my bigger.
Yeah, that's a great message. Yeah, to really get that support in the lifestyle piece is so great. And I'm assuming then when you work with people, you're also helping maintain the muscle mass, because that was the other thing. People are concerned if they're not eating as much, maybe they're not eating enough protein and they're not.
Yes. So I have a whole protocol for that. So it's not just eating the protein, but specific supplements to really help to support that protein allotment and also the weight training. So anyone that's working with me personally, I am on them in terms of not losing, because you will naturally, when you are in that much of a caloric deficit, you will naturally lose some muscle, but I don't want it to be above and beyond. And I can tell, I can look at people and just know that they've lost so much muscle. We call that skinny fat. So they're smaller, but they're so flubby. And I know a lot of people and they'll say to me, I know I didn't do it right. I took the meds. I hardly ate. I didn't go to the gym. And now look at me. I look like I have grandma legs and grandma arms. So I personally don't find that attractive. I think that it's super important, if you are on the medication or considering taking the medication, really, really, really important that you prioritize a number of things: protein, weight bearing exercise, and other lifestyle habits for sure.
Wonderful. Being mindful of our time today, Audrey, what are two things, after everything that you've just shared with us, what are two things that a woman can do starting today if she's feeling stuck in the world of weight loss resistance?
I would say, I'm going to say two things. Prioritizing protein and fiber. So this is like a little blurb that I tell my clients every day when we're talking about their meals. And so we're going to talk about one thing that's food related and one thing that's movement related. Okay. So I'd say every time you go to create your meal, you're going to ask yourself two questions and you're going to fill in the blank with those first. Where is my protein? Where is my fiber? Because they're like two peas in a pod, and the protein and fiber are best friends, and they are really going to keep you healthy, full, satisfied, and it's going to just work on gut flora. It's going to do so many things for you. So if you can prioritize those two things at every meal, let's not make this complicated, right? Because for people who feel stuck, they feel like the idea of losing weight is so daunting. It's like climbing a mountain.
Yes.
So I would say this, in addition to asking yourself those two questions with every meal, after that, I want you to just take one day at a time. Today, I am not going to have any junk. Just today, how can I nourish myself to the best of my ability? How can I show myself some self-care and self-love? How can I create meals that are going to fill me and not trigger me? And what can I do to move my body today? And can I get in my 60 ounces of water? But only worry about today and stop thinking and projecting about the rest of the week, the rest of the month. Oh my goodness, I want to be 20 pounds lighter by June 15th. How am I going to do that? Once you go down that rabbit hole, you get paralyzed.
Yeah.
So for people who are feeling stuck, just worry about today. And it really makes a tremendous difference. Those are my two recommendations, really. Baby steps, worry about today, be in the moment, and prioritizing those two things at your meals. And then the rest of the meal sort of falls into place. If you prioritize your protein, and when I say fiber, I'm talking about a garden on your plate. Half your plate needs to be a combination of greens, vegetables, You want it to look like a garden, a rainbow sitting on your plate with that protein. And then the other things will just fill in. Your healthy fat will fill in, your maybe a complex carbohydrate will fill in. But really, if you answer those two questions, your meal will be rock solid.
Now, do you recommend like certain macros for people, or is it more just by sight?
I do. I mean, when I'm working with my client, we go into detail on the macros, on the calories. And that is, I wouldn't consider myself a macro coach per se, because I work on the entire person, but macros is absolutely part of the whole process. And it's not for everybody. I have a bunch of clients that just it's daunting to think about using a tracking app. Like they just can't, and they would rather eat more intuitively. I have had many, many, many clients not track and lose tremendous amounts of weight. So we create sort of a formula or a template for them. So I can work in a variety of different ways, and you have to meet the client where they are. So we just kind of take it one step at a time.
And we forgot to ask, we wanted to ask you about sugar, if that's something that has to be totally off the table, or can we enjoy it in moderation?
I think the answer to that is, if you can enjoy it in moderation, absolutely. It's very important to understand yourself. And this is something that I have been working on my entire life. This is actually like sugar and sugar addiction is a real, I would say, it's a very important part of the work that I do, because I know for a fact that certain individuals have what I call, like, they're very high on the susceptibility scale for addiction. And I'll tell you a little story. A few weekends ago, almost every Sunday, I have my entire family to my home for dinner. My parents are local, my sister and brother-in-law are local. And we were having dessert because I think we were celebrating my son's birthday, and there were lots of desserts and gelato and things. And I had decided a few weeks prior to that I was giving up sugar. And I do this every once in a while, because I have my own story around sugar, and it was time for me to stop. So I pulled out some frozen blueberries and frozen raspberries and some of my little almond milk whipped cream. And I was putting that together. And my brother-in-law said, "Aud, what are you doing?" I said, "Robbie, this is my dessert." He said, "Why?" I'm like, "Well, I gave up the sugar." He said, "What? For how long?" I said, "Well, definitely until I go away this summer, because it just doesn't work for me." He's like, "Oh my God, really?" And he kind of made a face, and I looked at him and I said, "Robbie," because he is sober and many, many years, and God bless him, he's done a beautiful job. And I said, "My sugar is like your alcohol." And he looked at me and said, "Ah, gotcha." I said, "Does anyone say to you, just have a sip?" And he said, "No." I said, "Well, I know that it doesn't feel like sugar is that way for people. Like, it's a hard comparison to make, but I truly believe that for some individuals, it really is that strong of an addiction." And I explained to him that when I get going with all my little things, whether it's 100 calories or 200 calories, but it's my little Catalina bar, and the dialogue in my head every day is debilitating. I have major food noise. And so I wake up in the morning and I start to think, am I having one? Am I having two? Can I have it after lunch, or is it going to be after dinner? What if I want the two? I mean, the noise and the energy that it takes in my head is so exhausting.
Sure.
And so I get to a point every number of months and I say, I just can't do this anymore. And so I put it all away. And when I tell you, it is the most liberating feeling in the entire world. So to answer your question, some people can do sugar in moderation and it's not a problem. At the end of the day, you need to learn how that food, whether it's sugar, white flour, nuts, almond butter, peanut butter, whatever it is, right, that is calling your name and causing a mess in your head, right? If it's causing a mess and calling your name too much, then you know it doesn't work well for you.
Sure. Wow. What a great story and great advice. And I was laughing about the almond butter because, like I've even overdone that, like gotten on a kick where it's too much. And so, you have to know yourself.
I always say, if anything is just speaking to you too loud, it's probably not for you.
Yep. Very good advice. Well, thank you so much. I want to say you can connect with Audrey on Instagram at Zoe_healthy. And Audrey also has a summer body blast program coming up. We're going to put details in the show notes. And if you want to briefly just tell us a little bit about what that's going to be.
Yes, absolutely. So it is a 4-week program to basically get you all summer ready so that you can really feel your best. And I know it sounds crazy, 4 weeks, it's not much time, but I'm getting you started. So within the 4 weeks, you will have a plan of action for the remainder of spring into summer and beyond. And it's just a way to really, get your head in the right space, get your mindset really glued in. I will obviously be helping everybody in terms of the nutrition, all of the foundational pieces, even many of the things I spoke about today, we will talk about in length. And there'll be a special guest. There will be a private Facebook group, a private WhatsApp group, a ton of downloadable materials, like tremendous ebook with recipes and meal ideas and snack ideas. And it's just chock full of everything really to get you going. This 4-week program is compact, but loaded with material. And then if you really want a little more one-on-one time with me, because the 4 weeks, it's every Wednesday evening, 7 p.m. Eastern time. They are Zoom sessions in a group setting. So I will be teaching a theme every single week. There will be plenty of time for Q&A. But if you want one-on-one time with me, I offer a VIP package that adds on 2 private sessions with me to be used over the course of the 4 weeks. And many people do that because they really want to just sit with me and talk about all their stuff and how they can reach their personal goals. So super exciting. I have an informational session happening on Wednesday, May 7th, and then the program starts the week after. So I invite you. The informational session is free. You can sign up on my website for that, or you can go right to my Instagram account and sign up for that free webinar. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So we'll be sure to put that in the show notes. And thank you so much for everything. This was such a great conversation.
Wonderful. My pleasure.
The information provided in this podcast is for informational purposes only and is not intended for the purpose of diagnosing, curing, treating, or preventing any disease. We are functional medicine certified health coaches and not licensed medical professionals. The opinions and advice of guests are their own and also not considered to be medical advice. Always consult with a healthcare professional when making any healthy lifestyle changes. We would love to hear from you. Please leave a comment or review. Email us at info@functionalmoms.com. If you enjoyed this episode, please hit the subscribe button.